More than 200 people marched against the American Psychiatric Association in Philadelphia this weekend.
What do we want? Human rights! When do we want it? Now!
Now, the protest was dubbed Occupy the APA, which is holding its convention there, a gathering that draws more than 10,000 psychiatrists. The marchers are mainly opposed to the use of psychiatric drugs and treatment. Many who took part called themselves psychiatric survivors, including Jim Gottstein, an Anchorage attorney.
Tonight he's featured in part one of our series, Mind Over Meds, which Rhonda McBride brings us tonight. Rhonda.
Maria and Mike, many Alaskans would be surprised to learn that Jim Gottstein is a national leader in what's known as the PsychRights movement. That's why photographer Jessica Hoffman and I bring you this closer look at a man and his mission in part one of our series, Mind Over Meds.
So this is where you come on your way to work?
Yep, when I want to pick something up.
Jim Gottstein is not your average lawyer, nor your average person, not when you eat avocados for breakfast.
I have a real problem with sugar.
Jim has to pay attention to his body's cues.
It's all about sleep for me.
Jim knows that if he goes without sleep for too long, he could lose grip on reality.
I've really tried to manage things so that I don't get in that situation. I still do sometimes.
Jim Gottstein's first bout of schizophrenia struck when he was 29.
I feel like I was lucky not to have been made permanently mentally ill by the system's insistence on people taking drugs forever.
Gottstein believes his mental illness is a blessing. It drives his passion to help others.
It was a transformative experience.
Transformative, Gottstein says, in many, many ways.
I had no idea that my mind could just be completely screwed up, right? Because you rely on it.
Most of all, he wants everyone to know mental illness need not hold you back forever.
I really love what I do, and I've been very lucky to get to do what I have wanted to do most of my life.
A life now devoted to fighting the system.
So no receptionist to greet us?
No.
Jim inherited this office building from his grandfather, the main source of income for his PsychRights practice. Gottstein would like more help shedding light on mental illness. He is in constant demand.
Next message.
Calls come in every day from all over the country from people who want to know their rights.
They just give us the runaround. They won't even tell us what meds he's on or how he's doing or anything. They're just being completely ridiculous.
Gottstein returns every call and sometimes gives free legal advice.
I think I'm the only one anywhere that's doing what I'm doing. I mean, because there's no money in it, I've pretty much gone broke doing this.
This might come as a surprise to many Alaskans. Jim was born to wealth from the Cars Gottstein grocery empire. With a diploma from Harvard Law School, this class of '77 graduate had a bright future ahead. He had a pilot's license, learned to skydive, was ready to throw himself into a new law practice and politics as well. Then it fell apart.
Just going, trying to do all this stuff at the same time, and it was just too much.
After going for days without sleep, Gottstein started hearing voices.
I just heard something, and in my mind it was the devil coming down the hall after me. It was in June of 1982.
At a home in this neighborhood where Jim jumped out of a second-story window, running from the devil. He made it as far as this parking lot.
It was still light out. I was in my underwear, and I was, I think, spinning around and stuff, and an ambulance came, and they put me in a straitjacket and hauled me off to API.
API, the Alaska Psychiatric Institute, which Gottstein says was a terrifying place, where he was forcibly shot up with strong psychiatric drugs that brought sanity, but serious side effects.
They told me that I'd have to be on the drugs for the rest of my life and to forget about having, any kind of productive life.
But Gottstein didn't give up and worked hard to get off medication. He later went on to help launch the Alaska Mental Health Trust. Thanks to a landmark lawsuit and the billion-dollar settlement Gottstein and others won from the state, there will be money to fund mental health services far into the future.
Oh, it's a very unusual story.
Jeff Jesse says Gottstein is more than just the face of recovery, but a force for change.
Well, I definitely think Jim swims upstream against the tide of current medical practice in the field.
Jim Gottstein.
Spawning skepticism about the use of psychiatric drugs.
He is definitely a national figure in this area.
Gottstein's lawsuit over the drug Zyprexa made national headlines. It forced Eli Lilly to reveal the drug's dangerous side effects, diabetes and drastic weight gain, information others use to win $2 billion in settlements.
This is beyond alarming.
Even today, Gottstein still wages an information campaign against drugs that alter brain chemistry.
They increase mortality by twice. They double the rate of mortality.
Gottstein travels all over the country to warn people about what he calls an epidemic of modern medical malpractice and forced medication, a message that hits home for some in this room.
And being restrained, flat-eagled on the box with males pressing around me and someone giving me a shot, my pants being taken down, that was as close to rape as I can experience.
What Faith Myers described happened many years ago, and the mental health system has changed a lot since then, but not enough for Jim Gottstein,
Right.
who calls his fight Pharmageddon, an epic battle against a drug industry that continues to make new medicines that are increasingly prescribed by psychiatrists, medicines that Gottstein claims cause problems often mistaken for mental illness.
The same movement disorders, tardive dyskinesia, which is where the patients go like this.
However you weigh in on the mind over meds debate, Jim Gottstein says there's not enough awareness about the risks, even among doctors who prescribe the drugs. That's why he says he'll keep working out of one of the few office buildings left after Anchorage's Good Friday quake, one of the epicenters of America's PsychRights movement. Jim Gottstein's latest project in Alaska is Soteria, a long-term residential treatment program that tries to avoid the use of drugs to treat schizophrenia. The program has been highly successful in Europe, but right now it's the only one of its kind in this country.
Rhonda, is Jim Gottstein totally against the use of drugs in treating mental illness?
No, he says that they're just overused and that psychiatrists and the public need to know more about their side effects, and many patients don't like them, so what they do is they stop taking the medicines, and that triggers another crisis. It's very dangerous, and tomorrow night we'll talk with the head of the Alaska Psychiatric Institute for one other side of this debate.
All right.
Very interesting.
Rhonda,
Thanks,
thank you.
Rhonda.